the association's seeking reforms of the right to silence to assist in its police work along the lines of the British model. You're aware of their submission. What's your response, Mr. Daley?
It wouldn't really matter what I thought to matter for the Attorney General. I'm not trying to pass the buck, but it is as a lawyer and as someone who's a keen supporter of the police, I think you have to be very careful about tinkering with the touchstones of those sorts of things in the judicial system. I'm not convinced there's a need for it at this time, particularly when you have a body like the Crime Commission in New South Wales that has extraordinarily coercive powers over suspects. Only in very, very extreme circumstances should you forsake it. I'm happy with the model we've got right at the moment in New South Wales is the correct one.
Quickly on that, and will the Crime Commission provide under its current statutory protections and prescriptions?
Let me address the right to silence first.
Yeah.
I'm on the record in relation to my support for the consideration of the adoption, where possible, of the English model. The English model doesn't take away the right to silence. It doesn't say you cannot remain silent. What it says that in your proximity to a crime, where there is a relationship there, that if you do not answer the questions, the court may take a negative inference. Whereas right now, it says the court will not take a negative inference. That's simply the change.
And with my smart lawyer, I can, after the event, create
what happens now. Right? Now, it's been in place for probably over 20 years. In fact, I went to the UK in 2005, and it was one of the things that I looked at over there, and I looked at the fine-tuning that had taken place in the UK since its introduction. Bearing in mind our system is based on the UK system, surely we can learn, because we've got protections in place now, electronic recording of suspected persons. You know, the whole world has changed in terms of no more statements in notebooks, no more signed statements, everything's electronically recorded. Why can't we consider this in relation to the Crime Commission? I am concerned there seems to be a bit of a turf war going on between the PIC and the Crime Commission. I really do believe the Crime Commission is absolutely crucial because of the high-end work that they do, but more importantly, the special powers that we give them, and also their ability to go after money.
Well, do you have confidence in the Crime Commission as it's currently managed and arranged? And if you don't, or if there's some qualification on that answer, what would you do?
No, look, the organisation, from an outsider's view, is very secretive. I don't, in opposition, get an opportunity to look into the way that they
operate. When you're the minister, you get briefed on the Crime Commission.
He's chairman.
You're the chair.
You're chairman. You know everything that's going on about the Crime Commission.
Everything I need to know, yes.
I mean, look, it did get into a bit of in-flight turbulence with a matter that's currently before the courts. But you can't take away from the fact that we need organisations like this. We've got to have trust in them. But like the PIC, we have to have procedural fairness. And I understand fully the concerns that have been raised by the rank and file police about the PIC's approach to procedural fairness. And these organisations that operate within the law have to have the same sort of parameters in terms of procedural fairness that the cops have.
And let's get it clear, I know I'm concentrating on you, but if you get into government, you will remove the prohibition on police officers from New South Wales being appointed as investigators of the PIC.
Yeah, I've got a real concern about that. That was originally done because of the Royal Commission, I really do.
Well,
and I think it needs to go.
What you acknowledge was that the corrupt culture in New South Wales.
But now it's a continuing blight that New South Wales cops aren't good enough to go into this organisation. I think it's about time we've got over this blight.
And you think New South Wales police have got the capacity professionally to maintain secrecy and confidentiality of their operations?
They work at the highest levels in drug operations, in counter-terrorism. It's about time we actually said we trust you and allow you to apply if you're suited and qualified to go to those sort of organisations.
I think the current regime is correct. I wouldn't be advocating changing.
Okay, well, we've got that on the record. It'll be interesting to watch. Now, we have gone for an hour. We could go on for another 2 hours, I'm sure.
Very quickly, tinker with the Crime Commission at your own peril is a vital organisation, and I have no reason, as Minister of the Crime Commission, to have any doubts whatsoever.
Even after it had been infiltrated by organised crime?
Well, that was one officer who's being dealt with, but you tinker with the Crime Commission at your own peril. I've said if there was one thing you would do to make organised, the most serious organised criminals in New South Wales shout with glee, apart from reducing the numbers of police in New South Wales, it would be to hobble the Crime Commission.
And you're satisfied that, in as far as its recovery of the proceeds of crime, that very powerful instruments are being applied fairly. From all your observations, sitting here as chairman of the Crime Commission.
Yes, because there is judicial oversight of all of those recovery proceedings. In fact, we've beefed them up. We've got the strongest unexplained laws in the nation now. And all of them are oversight by a Supreme Court judge.
Okay, that they can ignore. In the PIC's case, they ignore the recommendations.
Okay, well, what would you do about it? You've got oversight by a judge.
The same rules apply to the Commissioner of Police, the same rules should apply to these organisations. No, we're talking about the oversight. We're talking about oversight.
I was talking about, the question I was asked was about criminal assets recovery.
The fairness.
And I think, yes, it's fair
fairly applied.
because the threshold has to be determined by a judge, whether they've been involved in serious crime-related activity. The judge says, no, they haven't. That's the end of the application.
But total oversight does not apply to every aspect of one or two of these secret organisations.
That's not true. The PIC oversees the Crime Commission and has the powers of the Standing Royal Commission.
But how can the PIC oversight the Crime Commission when they're working on joint operations? What are they?
They're not.
They would. Inevitably, they would.
They don't. They have different.
If they're going after corrupt police officers,
They're involved in organised crime.
They might.
The tentacles intertwine very, very closely.
The crew, one is involved in the integrity of a police officer as far as he does his duties, and the other one is the investigation of criminal activities. So I don't understand what the...
You seem to have information that there's joint operation.
It's historically been the case that if you've got organised crime, then the chances are there's a potential for police to be involved and you'll have a crossover in terms of investigations.
That's not correct.
Not seem to be his experience as chairman.
Look, at the end of the day, you cannot, in my view, have the situation that we have at the PIC where you've got an inspector oversighting it, making recommendations in relation to where they think there are failings in the system, and for at least the belief within the New South Wales Police Force that that organisation is upholding the rule of law and the same rules apply in terms of procedural fairness. We cannot have a continuing situation where recommendations by the inspector over the PIC are being ignored.
Okay, did we go for one question? Could you please identify yourself?
Is that? I don't mind starting. Greg Black, question to you, Mr. Gallacher. Being a resident of Northern Beaches and a parent, I'm pretty impressed that Manly's been tidied up. But the strategies that have been deployed in Manly that seem to be working pretty well involved lockouts, earlier closing, and responsible service and some restrictions that seem pretty similar to the strategies that were employed in Newcastle. So it would seem to me what's worked in Newcastle has worked in Manly, and they form the tenets of our Last Drink campaign. So I think Manly's success is a reflection of what our campaign's all about. Would you agree?
What's happened in Manly, of course, was the policing strategy that was employed there was to sit down with the local licensed premises and said, can we work through to get a solution? In Newcastle, the licensed premises did not believe that they were part of the negotiation. They felt that it was foisted upon them. What's happened in Manly is a local solution to a local problem. And what I'm saying, and Barry O'Farrell is saying, that we should be using Manly as the template and let local communities work through with their cops and accords and licensed premises to get a resolution on these issues. We're not opposed to it, but as Michael and I both said, a blanket rule that says let's shut everything down at 3 a.m. Do you seriously think that's going to change people's behaviour in terms of alcohol, getting on the grog, building cops and building anybody else? They'll just change their drinking hours. Instead of going out at 10 o'clock at night, they'll go back to the old days and start going out at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Still fill up, still go out the street, still build somewhere.
I suppose all we can say is the evidence is there that it does work.
We'll take that as a comment.
Questions?
You know what? I don't need that. Mr. Lincoln from Mr. Daley, you mentioned about record numbers being brought onto the cops while the Labor Party's been in power, and we've all seen record number pass at the academy in the lead up to an election every time. Now, what doesn't get mentioned is they don't get trained as well as they should have when they have those record passes, and we don't have the experienced cops on the street to train once they come out. Now, I'm at City Central. I've been in A District my entire career, and what we see all the time is junior staff come in. There's there's no senior staff to train. Now, I think any operational police would agree, 2 or 3 motivated, encouraged, supported senior constables to do a hell of a lot more work than 8 junior constables who are ill-trained. Why is this a constant focus on certain classes of academy, when instead we should be retaining staff, the exit strategies? If you ask some staff why they're leaving, they would say 1 or 2 small things changed, I'd stay. 1 or 2 small things, but it doesn't happen. There should be a concentration on retaining senior staff who have experience, do things, put things into place to make them encouraged and make them motivated so they'll stay on, and then they can train the juniors. City Central detectives, up until this week we had 3 designated detectives and an officer 3. Okay? And we're dealing with some pretty major crime. Excuse me, people are leaving in record numbers from our command to go to other places, and nothing is done to try to keep them in the neighbours. Why is that?
Okay, so second part of your question, there should be strategies in place to retain staff. I agree 100%. And insofar as I, as the Minister, could aid that, I would. It just needs to be fed up to my office through my weekly meetings or monthly meetings with the association, or fed up through your executive, put to me. And insofar as we could do what governments do, just to provide funding or support, 100%. But in relation to your first part of your question, neither I nor the government have anything to do with class sizes or the timing of them, ever. They are completely worked out by Deputy Commissioner Byrne, and the sizes of the classes are booked 18 months in advance. So nothing to do with us whatsoever. We don't have a direction or any suggestion to the police force at all that they be done before an election. That is entirely done by the police force. Nothing whatsoever to do with that. Well, I'm telling you, the way it works is, what we've done as a government is to make sure that we've kept funding the police so that they never fall below authorised strength. The sawtooth effect between classes is funded. So when we fund the authorised strength at the moment, which is 15,806 after a class, it goes way over that. And the police force executive come to me and say, we're over strength, we need $30 million. We could solve that by letting it drop and being $30 million under, but then you got this seesaw effect of strength. Every time the police executive had come to this government and said, we're over strength, we need $30 million or $40 million to keep numbers high, we've delivered it.
Okay. You don't want to say anything?
I don't think I have to. Obviously, I think that's a bit farcical in relation to interference with classes.
All right, we'll call it a wrap. Oh, sorry, yes, quick question, yes.
Hi, Partridge is my name. I'm the branch administrator at City Central. I agree with everything Winston Langthorne, my brother Detective.
Agreements come up, and I can't give you a commitment now because that's something that's negotiated, as it always is, every 2 years, full stop.
And you've got to protect the public purse.
Well, you've got negotiations to go through with all agencies, whether they're nurses or teachers or police. There's a finite budget. There's a government wages strategy. There are inputs from Treasury, budget forecasts, all of those things. And no police minister of the day has the power to make a commitment that they will do such a thing.
Well, you know what? Win the election, you'll make a commitment then.
Well, the fact is, I've never been in government. But what I can tell you is the way that they were treated, the rank and file were treated during the last negotiation was pretty poor. It really was. Right. And I think we should see an end to that approach. True,
but you've got to protect the public purse as well.
You do need to protect it, but you need to start showing some respect. And one of the first things that needs to happen is a realistic understanding of just how thin the cupboard is in policing. There is no huge bloated bureaucracy. Once you start cutting back on resources in police, you're not hurting people who are hidden in office somewhere, you're hurting people who are on the street. Now, you've got to find that balance. But the most important thing that I think that we have, and I'd like to think I have, is that I actually have empathy.
I mentioned earlier that Barry O'Farrell has adopted this strategy where he's going to tell you and your fellow citizens of New South Wales as little as possible to avoid criticism, and then to give him a massive amount of wriggle room after the election if he's elected, and he can say hand on his heart, I never broke a promise, because he hasn't made any. He's not making any. And if you have a look at some of the things that we've promised in the last week in terms of equipment, $28 million to replace radios, $3.8 million to replace 2,500 bulletproof vests, $1.3 million to roll out load-bearing vests to all of you should you want them, an update of tasers, an option to wear thigh holsters, more money for optical scanning, more money for SEED, $9.5 million for the Well Check program. If you compare that to the promises made and the election commitments made by the opposition, they're going to have an audit, they're going to have a restructure, they're going to have sober up tanks for drunks, which I know Scott Weber said was a stupid idea the other day, avail yourselves of the promises that are made by both sides, and you'll see that we want to continue, and we've promised to continue, a comprehensive delivery for the Police of New South Wales. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Gallacher.
As I indicated earlier on, we've not heard anything from the government in terms of the future. It's relying on statistics. Today we hear about, and we heard in the last week, radios, vests, tasers. I'm surprised they haven't announced that they're actually going to replace the tyres on cars. These are equipment. These should automatically be done anyway. There shouldn't be a gift from government. These things all have an expiry date. We know that they've got expiry dates, and we actually think, well, once they're done, you're going to get new ones. Great news. Everybody's going to get new bullets from the government for the Glocks because you're all overdue. This is silly. When you look at the announcements they made in relation to police stations, 10 police stations, $7 million. They don't even buy the plans. Not one admission today from the government that there are organisational issues that are tearing away at the heart of morale, that are tearing away at your ability to actually do your job. And guess what? If you start to address the organisational matters, get off your back and allow the cops to get out there and do the job, giving them the confidence and saying to them, we think you're good enough to go to organisations like the Police Integrity Commission. You're qualified. You're doing it in internal affairs. We trust you. Once you start to make those commitments, police then believe in themselves and the winners, the community of New South Wales, because they start to see a spring in the step of their cops. Thank you.
And here's the Association President, Scott Weber.
Thank you, Quinn. Before I get to the actual thank yous, just firstly, as a police officer, we always make notes, and we go to domestic violence, we go to assaults, we go to motor vehicle accidents, we listen to the stories and then we work out the facts. And the facts are here, is that police officers across the state of New South Wales are doing a sensational job, but we need to be backed up. And we are meeting the state planning goals, we're meeting all our goals in regards to budgets, we're meeting all our performance targets. We're the best performing public sector, but that doesn't mean we should be neglected. We are doing a sensational job out there, but we need support. And that is the request in regards to numbers. 1,500 over 8 years. These are modest requests. We've actually looked at statistics. We actually haven't done a pie in the sky figure. We've done what we actually needed. And this is in regards to the negotiations, fair and honest. We're talking about facts. In regards to Australia across the board, we're the second lowest jurisdiction in regards to numbers per population. And the only one that is actually lower is Victoria, and they've been promised 1,700 extra police. So we need honest commitments before this election. And what also we need when we're talking about last strengths, one size does fit all. We're talking about a line in the sand protecting the community. To all emergency service workers, especially police, this is just common sense. It's about actually looking after the community, but also those police officers that are on the front line. We've seen a 37% reduction in assaults. Imagine what other duties we could do, imagine what other jobs we could go to, and how else we could protect the community. Everything's been about budgets and money. This is actually reducing the amount of police officers that are needed to deal with a crime that's preventable. Let's stop the crime before it starts. Let's put this in place. And we're talking about 320 licensed premises across the state of New South Wales. Let's have a trial at the very least. Let's have a look at it for 3 months. The other issues there, obviously D&D, it's about the protection of police officers, deaf and disability. Police officers run into jobs when everyone else is running away. Let's make sure we protect the frontline police officers that look after the state of New South Wales. You protect the police, you protect the community, you protect the people that are voting for you. Look, it comes down to one word for us, respect. We don't see respect in the court systems, and we've seen that over the last couple of years. We're not getting respect out on the streets. I think our leaders that we are going to nominate on the 26th of March need to respect us. And that's in regards to superannuation, our salaries, making sure that we actually do get paid for the job that we do, putting our life on the line, making sure we don't have a boom and bust in regards to recruitment, and we actually have strategic places of numbers that are put across the state, and police officers are looked at in regards to being the front line, looking after the welfare of the community. We are not here to actually debate and be used as a political football. We're talking about police officers out on the front line, protecting the community. So what we're calling from all sides of politics is for you to look after us, because we look after the state of New South Wales, and we want to be the premier state, so we need to be a premier police force. Now, thank you very much for your time. It was a welcome debate. Firstly, I'd like to thank Quentin for moderating. He did a sensational job. Thank you very much.
Those missing tapes, Quentin.
The main reason we're giving Quentin a gift is that we actually offered to pay for his services, and he refused. He said he works for the ABC, so it's a gift from the government. Yeah, that's right. He refused payment, but thank you very much for your time. On top, this isn't a bribe, but what I do want both sides of politics to is to wear this tie with pride and remember that there's 16,000 police officers that protect the state of New South Wales and make your job easier. So can you make ours easier as well?
Yeah.